Wagwan everybody. Today we'll be discussing the sad story of Victor Vance in GTA Vice City Stories. How a good and moral person has been thrown into the world of criminals and bad guys. It's a very interesting topic in my opinion, to just think about how did he find himself working with criminals? How come he at some point became a drug lord? What was his motivation in all this? As well as to analyze his relationships with characters like Lance or Louise, how they changed his life and what they meant to him. And most importantly, we'll try and speculate on why did he come back to the drug business 2 years later in GTA Vice City. First though, we're going to quickly recap his whole story to make sure we have a clear picture of Vic's character in our minds. If you don't want to go through his story again though, check out the chapters on the video's timeline. In 1984, Victor Vance, a man of a Dominican descent, is working for a living as a soldier in Vice City Army Unit. He and his two brothers, Lance and Pete, have been raised by their aunt, Init, because their mother was a crackhead and the drugs were more important for her than her children. Little is known about his father, apart from the fact that he moved from the DR to the United States. Similarly, we don't know where Vic and his brothers were raised, as well as the location of his aunt and Pete's residence. We can only assume that it is in America, since Lance and Vic both have American accents, which indicates that the Vance family left their home country while the children were still in a very young age, or were not even born yet at all. And actually, I would be definitely in favour of the second option, since Victor's dopehead mum, Janet, also has a plain American accent, which indicates that Victor's dad met Janet after arriving in America, not back in the DR. Anyway, one of Vic's brothers, Lance, was pretty much a failure all of his life. He was mocked at school and once he got kicked out of the Boy Scouts. Another one of Vic's brothers, Pete, was suffering from asthma and required additional medical treatment, which obviously costs money. And as Lance was not a very reliable person, Vic, the most mature and responsible of the children, had to be a financial head of the family. Therefore, he moved to Vice City and joined the local army unit. One day, he got asked by his superior officer, Sergeant Jerry Martinez, for a favor, but like an under the table kind of favor. Vic, as a moral guy who did not look for any trouble, was not very encouraged by this, but eventually he agreed to do one little favor for his superior, as Jerry assured him that no risk was involved. The truth turned out to be completely different, as Vic nearly died. Martinez made a smart move here, cause he asked Vic to hide the drugs which Vic collected in his barracks, so Vic can't quit. Vic however got encouraged by the prospect of making extra money and therefore he came back for more work to Martinez. Soon however things got out of hand as Martinez, who was going to take the drugs from Vic's barracks, has presumably been caught red-handed and therefore he made up an excuse that the drugs belonged to Vic, because of which Vic got kicked out of the army. In the coming weeks, Vic, left with no choice, was dragged into the criminal world even deeper, as he worked for local gang boss Marty Williams, as well as he found himself on Martinez's hit list, which even further chained him to the world of crime. Vic, however, turned out to be a very skillful guy, and soon he took over Marty's business, becoming a gang boss himself. The person who convinced him to do that was Louise, so Marty's mistreated wife. It was also clear that Louise and Vic had feelings for each other and both seen their future with the other. Soon, after Vic's brother Lance joined him in Vice City, Vic, out of his lust for revenge on Martinez, thieved his drug shipment that later turned out to be a property of the Mendezes brothers. Thereby, he made himself another serious enemy in the Bolivian bosses of a local cartel. Vic, in the end, managed to get rid of all of his foes, but along the way, Louise has been killed. Vic, once the Mendezes brothers and Jerry Martinez were gone, wanted to leave the city and get as far as possible from dealing drugs and running errands for gangsters, as now he didn't have to do it anymore. He earned enough money for him and his family and got his name off all the hit lists. Then we see him 2 years later in GTA Vice City when he's meant to sell us drugs and dies in a failed transaction. So what happened that Vic returned to the business that he hated? We'll cover that later in the video. First, let's try and figure out why Vic even entered the criminal underworld in the first place. Well, the answer is quite simple. Money. I mean, obviously, right? Vic just knew that maybe he could do a couple of under the table jobs which would maybe allow him to look for other opportunities cure his brother's illness and start moving forward in his life. 'Cause Vic was stuck. He had to make money for not only himself, but also for Pete's medical bills, for his mother's drug habit, and maybe even for his other brother and his aunt, although we don't know that for sure. What we do know for sure is that there was nothing left for him. He couldn't start saving money because he just had too many financial responsibilities. That's why he agreed to run a few favors for Martinez, in hope that he can make some extra and start working towards financial stability. But everything went to ish in the end and he was left with no opportunities apart from becoming a gangster. However, Vic, despite wanting to get out of this environment, he was still managing to get himself deeper and deeper into it. The next serious moment in his criminal journey was when Luis convinced him to take over Marty's business. Vic agreed, again, driven by money. I think he just thought that, for some time, I'm gonna run this business, earn a lot of money to get my family all set up, and then I'll just quit, start some company or something and live happily ever after. So actually, pretty much the same as why he agreed to work with Martinez. So Vic didn't learn from his own mistake. He already experienced that this game comes with risk, and at some point it's almost certain that something will go very wrong and he'll get himself even deeper into it. Although on the other hand, he didn't have much of a choice, because his only source of money was working for Marty, whom he just killed. So how was he supposed to earn the money for himself and his family, and for Luis, who also became an important figure in his life? That was all he had at the time, so he got into it. And he actually got lucky, because despite all the trouble he had, for example with that Forbes guy, he was doing alright. Made some powerful friends like Humberto Urbina, expanded his business, the money was coming in. And then his overexcited brother, who joined him in Vice along the way, found out about a certain shipment that was meant to set him and Vic up for a long time. Vic, this time, knowing that this only sounds so colourful and great, but in reality it will get him deeper into the game and he'd have even more crap to wipe up, more trouble, more enemies, let alone that Luis would be even more endangered than she already was. And he knew that he was already making very decent money, so there was no need to go deeper into the drugs game. But this time, there was a different reason why he eventually agreed to thief this shipment. It belonged to Jerry Martinez. And Vic, this time, not because of money, not because of the lack of opportunities, but because of his desire for revenge, agreed to steal the shipment from his old buddy Martinez. And yet again, the world showed Vic that getting himself deeper into the game does not end well. The drugs were soon stolen off the Vance brothers, most likely by their crackhead mother, who reminded herself how much she likes wintertime. And that was not even the worst part, cause the drugs turned out to be the property of the Mendez brothers, and Martinez was only a shepherd, as he called it. And now Vic just got himself another enemy, or rather like two enemies, who were a lot more serious than some porn-loving, drugged-up idiot like Martinez. But Vic, yet again, managed to handle this and got things straight with the Mendezes. And then the Mendezes, in exchange for not trying to freaking kill him and all of his family, asked him to give up all the influence in the city and leave. And actually, Vic and Lance react to it negatively. They are outraged by this. And with Lance, yeah, there's no surprise really, but with Vic, there is. Cause isn't that exactly what he wanted the whole time? To get money and then just leave the city and get away from all this? I mean, sure, he had some loose ends, or rather one loose end in Martinez, but Martinez was not such a rude boy to chase after Vic. Vic already made a lot of money, so why would he now suddenly want to stay in the business? I never understood that. For me, the offer from the Mendezes was like a lottery win for Vic. I mean, obviously, it would probably hurt his pride, but what was more important, his pride or his family, Luis, and his morals? As much as I could explain the previous decisions, I don't think I can explain this one. For me, Vic should have just agreed. Get the money he's made so far, take Luis and Lance with him and get away. Instead, he decided to stay in the business, war the Mendezes, which resulted in Luis dying. So the very thing he sworn to protect. So Vic, despite not really belonging to the world of crime, he constantly would get himself even deeper into it. The first moment agreeing to run a few errands for Martinez, then agreeing to take over Marty's business. In both of these situations though, I can understand why Vic would do that. He had little choice. However, the next two decisions, for me, are simply wrong. First, Vic agrees to thief Martinez's coke, just because of his desire for revenge, which should never be a motivation. Rockstar been trying to show that to everybody for the whole series. Sweet and Smoke, Bogren and Luis, Nico and Darko, and even Devin with Michael to some degree. Revenge without any benefits is never a good advisor. If you can just let something go, it's best to do it. And that's what Vic should have done. And then the last moment when he decided to woo the Mendezes instead of just taking his chance and quit, for me is just inexplicable really. So I'm waiting for your help in the comments on this one. What would you do if you were Vic? Maybe Vic, deep inside, enjoyed living this life. It sounds mad, I know, but how else would you explain all those decisions that were simply against himself? Was it because of his brother who was in love with the gangster life and Vic just wanted to protect him because he knew that Lance was hopelessly incompetent? What about Louise though? Vic saw his future with her, so why not do it for her? Quit, I mean. Did he really, secretly, maybe even not aware of it himself, enjoy the life of crime? That would also explain why he returned to the business 2 years later. Actually, that was the fifth moment, the fifth decision to make. He yet again could go even deeper into the drugs game or stay away from it. And for the fifth time, he agreed. And look, the first decision lost him his job. The second decision, so taking over Marty's operation, actually didn't bring any bad consequences really. But then, the third decision got Vic two powerful enemies in the Mendez brothers. The fourth one resulted in the death of the woman of his life. And even after all those lessons, he still agreed for the fifth time. And this time, let's say that the world had enough and just made sure he ain't gonna make another bad decision and just killed him. It seems like some sort of addiction, you know, that despite Vic knowing it was bad for him and not really wanting to be a gangster, he kept increasing the dosage, and even if he had a chance to get out of this ish, he wouldn't take it, which for me makes him a hypocrite. I mean, I like Vic a lot, one of my favorite protagonists surely, but to be honest, his fate, how he ended up, was purely his own fault. Despite thinking he wanted out of the game, he would keep getting himself deeper into it, even despite the fact that almost every time he was losing something, a job, a loved one, and eventually even his own life. Pretty sad, right? In the end, it seems like Martinez was right as well.
You know what your problem is? You're trying to be the good guy in a bad man's game!
Vic didn't belong to that world, and yet he couldn't get enough of it. Kind of a guilty pleasure example, right? Well, that would be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with what I think? And yeah, what would you do if you were Vic in those moments that were discussed in the video? Thank you for watching. Respect.